Christmas is a time to be with loved ones, family, friends. It's to be together. No matter who you are or what you believe, that is the most common attribute of Christmas. So now imagine your 21-year-old son, who's very caring, very loving, goes out for a night out at a Navy base with the Navy just 2 weeks before Christmas, and then is never seen again, and he disappears without leaving a trace. Before we get into it, disclaimers are a must. This is a true case. It is real people, and these real people have real families. Be very careful about what you say. Just be a bit sensitive. I don't want you to comment, I don't want you to share, but be sensitive as you do so. I also apologise. I know a lot of you prefer solved cases, but it's Christmas, and I thought this story needs to be told. I promise I'll try and get you another solved case out this week. Almost forgot to mention, this one was requested by Lorna. Thank you, Lorna. Born in 1974, Philip Fudge had an older brother, older sister, and 2 younger sisters. While they were growing up, Philip was a typical lad. He enjoyed football and doing all the things that young boys did. Later on, he was a big fan of rugby and Formula 1 racing. So much so that when F1 racer Nigel Mansell left F1 and moved to America to do IndyCar racing, Philip won a competition to go over there and meet Nigel and watch the race. Philip's older brother and one of his younger sisters had a condition called hydrocephalus. Obviously, I looked this up, and it's basically fluid around the brain. Although the symptoms vary quite a lot, and it is a rare condition, but it's more often than not debilitating. As a result of this and other things, Nadine, Philip's mom, was extra protective of all 5 children. It's said that Philip was always incredibly caring of his older brother, Darren. Philip's older sister Linda said, because Philip was able-bodied and Darren wasn't, the care and attention that Philip used to give him to sort of take part in the things that he did was just incredible. He would play with him, the toys, toy soldiers, football. Philip Fudge grew up on Hessel Road in Hull, England. Linda described their home as a happy household with lots of love and care. Philip's love and affection for his older brother continued into adulthood. At 21-year-old, shortly before he went missing, Philip was a HGV driver, and he volunteered for the Territorial Army, driving lorries across Belgium and Holland. I would also like to add here that Philip was also a qualified baker and chef, and he did try working in them fields, but he found that his passion for cooking weren't quite met in the kitchen. He really cared about what he was cooking, but he could only really get jobs in like pubs and stuff, and they're more fast turnaround chuck it out type food. Whenever he was working locally as a lorry driver, Philip would pick up Darren and take him on trips. They'd spend the day together, travelling up and down the M62 while Philip did his rounds. At the time of his disappearance, Philip was still living with his family on Hessel Road. But the household had changed a little bit at this point. The older sister Linda had married and moved out, although she still visited often, and the mum and dad had split up. So on to December 1995. Philip had planned to attend a Christmas party at HMS Eaglet, a Royal Navy base in Liverpool. That was to be on the night of Saturday the 9th of December 1995. Disclosure here, there's a lot of sources that say December the 10th, 1995. But pretty much all the sources say that it was on a Saturday. Now, I looked it up, as I often do, and the 10th of December 1995 was a Sunday. So I assume that someone's got the dates wrong somewhere, and it's just continued. So I've looked it up, and I've assumed that it was on Saturday, which is the 9th, and not the Sunday, which is the 10th. I could be wrong there, but it's one of the two. It's definitely not Saturday the 10th. That Saturday morning, his mom had an early meeting. It was something to do with her work as a counsellor. He was still in bed. It was just a normal day. There was no reason to wake him. So she let him get some sleep. Having not said goodbye to her son, later that day, he and his 2 friends, who were a couple, travelled by car from Hull to Liverpool. That's a distance of about 130 miles and about 2.5 hours driving time. The plan was quite simple. Get there, have fun, stay the night at a friend's house, which is quite near to the base, and then travel back the next day. Philip did indeed go to Hull with these friends, as planned. But the next day, these same friends phoned his mom and asked if she'd heard from him. Although his plan was to spend the night with them, they had no idea where Philip was. Confused and panicked, Philip's mom phoned Linda. Linda tried her hardest to reassure her mom, but even she knew something wasn't right. She knew this was drastically unlike Philip. She said he wouldn't have just walked off and not let anybody know where he was. As much as I said to my mom, Don't worry, I'm sure everything will be okay. It wasn't Philip. It just wasn't him to do something like that. When Linda got to the family home, her and her mom phoned the police and reported Philip missing. Merseyside police, the police in Liverpool, launched an investigation, and one of the first things they did was examine Philip's car. The car was exactly where Philip had left it, in Liverpool, with all his belongings inside, just a short walk away from where he was meant to be staying. The second most obvious place to look would be the party, so the police turned their attention to HMS Eaglet. And there, a security guard at the base did tell the police that he'd seen Philip getting into a taxi as he left the base. It was with 2 girls and a boy. I mean, come on, what a great start to an investigation. If you know that somebody saw him get into a taxi, you know that he left, you can then trace the taxi, find out where it went, but it weren't that easy. The CCTV had been turned off somewhere else on the base, and the security guard couldn't remember what taxi it were, what car it were, what the registration were. So the trail went pretty cold, pretty quick. Now, let's hold on for a second. Why the hell was that CCTV turned off? I mean, I haven't got a military background, I'm unaware of how bases work, but in my head, a military base should always have its CCTV on, and surely you'd think it'd always be monitored. To me, that's just a no-brainer, and I'm really surprised that that's not that much of a big issue. Second of all, I don't know if the police then got in contact with all the different taxi companies, because if I were Philip's mom, I'd be certainly demanding that they phoned every company and found out which taxi was at the rank. It was at the barracks, sorry. I'm thinking taxi rank. I don't know about in 1995, but I'm fairly sure that taxi companies have to keep logs these days. And you'd expect somebody to remember that they went to a military barracks to pick somebody up. Navy barracks, whatever. Like I said, I don't know if the police did that, but if not, it's a major failing. During their investigation, the police considered that Philip could have had too much to drink and fallen into the docks. But apparently this is quite unlikely, because it means that they've had to climb quite a big fence, and it also had to get past security. But nonetheless, the dock and 200 miles of nearby coastline were searched. This did end up resulting in a body being found, but it wasn't Philip's body. The search went on for 5 weeks and involved both divers, boats and helicopters, but neither Philip or any information about where Philip may be was found. Meanwhile, in Hull, Nadine, Philip's mom, was doing everything that she could to find her son. The family had the full support of Homicide Police. Homicide Police is the police of Hull, where they lived, and the family have always praised their support. The charity Missing People were also on hand to help. Between them, posters were distributed across Liverpool and numerous media appearances were made. Nadine and Linda even went through the phone book and phoned every single taxi company in Liverpool, desperately trying to find out which company picked Philip up and where they took him. Along with other efforts, it didn't bring any new information. She also phoned police stations and hospitals. They even got Radio Merseyside to put out a message asking for Philip to phone home. Surprisingly to me, Homicide Police, which are the police in the area where Philip lived, remember, not the police located where he went missing, but Homicide Police ran a DNA sampling search on Philip's clothing that he'd left in his car. They obviously did this in case that he'd been around anybody else. Anybody that weren't in question on this case, their DNA might come up and they could then go and ask them for answers, or ask them questions, ask them for information. But again, nothing was found. At one point, it was suggested that Philip might have taken his own life, but Nadine and Lydia threw this theory out immediately. Linda said, he didn't suffer with mood swings. He was just a joyous, full of life, happy person who had his whole life ahead of him. He was 21-year-old. He was doing what 21-year-olds do. He was just enjoying life, and he wasn't off the rails or somebody who would cause trouble anywhere. He was just a genuinely nice person who cared about people. He cared about his elder brother and younger sisters, and cared about his family. The only time Philip was really distressed was when my parents separated. But he handled it as we all did. As you'd expect, Nadine was deeply tormented by the disappearance of her son. For years after her disappearance, she slept on the sofa downstairs. So if Philip knocked on the door or tried to come home, she'd hear the door. Things weren't made any easier by some strange phone calls that were made to the house. They were often silent calls on the other end, and she'd ask if it were Philip, but then the call would be ended. But one time when she answered the phone, there was a boy crying, and a voice said, "Mum, I'm sorry, I want to come home," over and over again. Of course, Nadine would ask who was calling, but they wouldn't answer. Instead, they'd just say, "I'll go now," and hang up. Homicide police did try and trace the calls, but they were unsuccessful. As the years went on, through all the pain and sleepless nights, Nadine continued her work as a local councillor. She was liked so much by constituents that in 2013 she was elected as the Lord Mayor of Hull. After working tirelessly to not only find her own son, but helping other families going through the same devastating loss, Nadine was eventually made a patron of the Missing People charity. In 2014, Nadine said, "I truly believe in my heart that he is out there somewhere, but no harm has come to him, and for whatever reason, he hasn't been in touch. I believe that, I have to. Not a single day goes by that I don't think about him. But Christmas is especially hard. It's the time of the year that he went missing, and for other people, it's all about being with family. For us, the family isn't whole because Philip isn't here." On New Year's Eve 2016, Philip's brother Darren passed away. 3 years later, in the summer of 2019, Philip's mom Nadine also died. Philip still hasn't been found, and they both died without any closure, any information about where Philip is or what might have happened. Between 1995 and 2016, every single year, every single Christmas, there was an empty place set at the table for Philip. About her mom, Linda said, "She was one of the good people, and through all her own grief and trauma, she was still trying to make sure that it didn't happen to anybody else. She wanted him to walk back through the door. She wanted him to ring, to write, anything. Just to say that he was okay. Always. We buried her and she never knew. I've never been able to give her that answer. Ever." Philip Fudge was 21-year-old when he went missing. He was 5 foot 10 inches tall. He had blue eyes. And he was a heavy build, with short facial hair. In 2022, Philip would have been 48 years old. And the Missing People charity are still asking for answers. They're still asking for any information that could help find Philip. If you think you have any information about this massively mysterious case, I know I haven't presented you much information, because there isn't much to present. But if you do think you have any information, if you recognise him from the pictures, you also know that I've had a picture of construction of what he may look like nearer the time of now. If anything comes to mind that you think would help find Philip, please do check in the description for links and information on how you can help. As I've just said, I am really sorry for a lack of information in this video. There isn't that much information to give out. Why do the video then? Because it's a case that I've never heard of it. And it's so heartbreaking that his mom and his brother, both who he was very fond of, have died without any answers. Not even an idea of what might have happened. And it's heartbreaking that every Christmas, Nadine never gave up hope. That table place was still set in hopes that Philip would come home. And I think it's a good reminder that at Christmas, the time to be joyous, there are still bad people out there. Share the love, be close to people. And I know it sounds very cliche, but those lonely people, just reach out. I'm not going to say that invite them to your house for Christmas. It's not happening. But do at least drop them a text message, at the very least. There are so many missing people around the world, and people don't just disappear. They have to be somewhere. There is something that happened to these people. Take care of yourself, take care of those close to you, and I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas. Till next time.